Now we arrive at the second biggest game this week. It is the only other ranked matchup, so it technically is in our rankings the second biggest game of the week. That will be the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs traveling to Oxford to take on the Rebels at number 16 Ole Miss, according to the playoff rankings. I don't even really know what to say about this game, if I'm being completely honest with you. Stats-wise, it looks like everything goes in Ole Miss's favor. They're actually favored in the ESPN FPI, 54% chance to win the game. The spread, however, is UGA by 2.5. Ole Miss is coming off an incredible game against Arkansas where they won 63-31. You don't see conference game blowouts like that ever. Their offense is really clicking right now. Jackson Dart playing some really good football. Their offensive line is top 10 in the country. Their defense is top 10 in the country. They're playing some really good ball right now. UGA coming off a rivalry win against Florida, 34-20. But the score doesn't really reflect how close that game was. It was not a 2-touchdown lead game. It was tied 20-20 halfway through the first quarter, and we actually were able to score some points off turnovers pretty much in garbage time. Once again, Carson Beck, he has a 3-interception game, multi-interception game, but the Dawgs still find a way to win. So in a couple of games this year, Carson Beck has thrown multi-interceptions or turned the ball over at least once. Actually, we've scored at least 31 points in every single game we've played this year, except for Kentucky, where we won 13-12. And if that doesn't say something about our defense, then you don't know ball. That says a ton about what our defense is able to do. We're in the top 30 in pressure rate. We do a lot there. The defense this game, however, they weren't as electric as I thought they would be coming off that, Texas game. The hype was big, which is what I mentioned earlier. You get that big hype, your back's against the wall. Everybody's doubting you. You come out and you basically blow them out and you win the game. And then you come out, against the next inferior opponent. No, don't take them as seriously. Probably got Ole Miss coming up on the road next week and taking a lot of consideration for that. And you almost lose a game. I do want to compare quarterbacks here. Jackson Dart, 72% completion rating on the season, 3,210 yards, 21 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. Now, the defenses they've played so far are not that great. I'd say the toughest one that they've played is LSU. Carson Beck, on the other hand, he's got a 66% completion percentage, 2,302 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. In his first 17 games, Carson Beck only threw 6 interceptions. In his last 6 games, he's thrown 11 interceptions. We've seen what Carson Beck can do, but he has not had that season this year. And I don't know what's going on with him. As a Georgia fan, I really don't know. It's like I've seen this man have greatness before. I've seen him come out and make these throws. Now, he doesn't have Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, sure. He's missing some weapons. But that doesn't mean he has nobody to throw to. He's got Arian Smith, who's extremely fast. Dominic Lovett, who can get open in space. Dylan Bell, who's just an absolutely sneaky wide receiver. He's slithery. He can get around you. He's fast. And he always follows his assignment. I mean, you've got guys who make plays and get open. But Carson Beck just makes awful decisions. He tries to thread the needle too much. He threw up a couple balls on Saturday against Florida that were just like, why in the heck are you throwing that? So I really don't know what's gotten into this guy's head. Obviously, Dart takes the win in quarterback comparison. But how will this offense just play against this defense? 3 weeks ago, we saw a Texas offense that was rolling, get absolutely shut down by this Georgia defense. We know what Georgia is capable of. Last year, this is the same thing that happened in the year before. They rank Ohio State above us. We go on the road or we play a team really well. Tennessee in 2022, Ole Miss last year, and what happens? We get the number 2 ranking back immediately, right? And could the same thing happen again this year? Or will Kiffin find a way to win? Or will he choke in the big games like he always does? This dude has not won a big game in a long time. The last big game he won was last year against LSU. Hasn't beat Bama, hasn't beat Georgia, and that's basically what's kept him out of the playoffs. So, is he going to choke or is he going to get the win? Isaac, you're picking first, and I especially am going to be interested in your pick just because I've already seen your team play them, and so have you. You were in the building. What do you think?
I think that LSU showed up in that game, and I think that Ole Miss is still a good team. but I don't think Ole Miss is quite who they have been in years past. Yes, they just rolled over Arkansas. I mean, no disrespect. Here's the thing. I don't even want to say no disrespect and talk about the LSU game because that's a team who held Tennessee to, like I think it was like 7 or 10 points. I don't know. It was a really close game. And they ended up upsetting them, right? And then LSU goes in there and handles them. And you had Tennessee who had Alabama and Neyland, and it was back and forth. They ended up pulling out the win. So the SEC has been just bang, bang, bang this year. Um, Georgia, like you said, Georgia has looked really good. But week in and week out, there's been a lot of inconsistencies. They go to Kentucky, they win by 1. Kentucky goes into Oxford, they upset and ruin the homecoming in the SIP, which I thought was hilarious. With that in mind, Carson Beck, I think Georgia needs him to have a legacy game. I really do, because this game being in Oxford could absolutely be an upset for the Bulldogs. I'm shocked Georgia's only favored by 2.5. Ole Miss is favored in the FPI. Man, this game really could go either way. I am going to have to go with the Bulldogs in this one. I think Georgia goes into Oxford and gets the win. I think it's close. I think they cover. I mean, it's not even quite a field goal spread, but I think this is a close game. I think Georgia gets it done. But if Carson Beck doesn't have or has a game anything like last week, this will be a different outcome for the Rebels. But I like Georgia on Saturday in Oxford.
So it's my turn to pick now. I've already rambled a lot, but something I do want to point out is I want to look at Ole Miss's schedule, right? So their first 4 games, they played Furman, who they beat 76-0, Middle Tennessee, who they beat 52-3, Wake Forest, who they beat 40-6, and then Georgia Southern, who they beat 52-13. And everyone was calling them top 5 team, great looking offense. They're going to probably make it to the SEC championship with the way that they're playing. Well, what happened in week 5? They came out and they lost to Kentucky at home during homecoming, 20-17. The next week they come out, they beat South Carolina 27-3. What happens next week? They come out the next week, they go on the road to LSU, and they lose 29-26. And then they come out the next week and they play Oklahoma and they only win 26-14 against a Oklahoma team that is absolutely dog water this year. And then, of course, they come out against Arkansas, and Arkansas, I think that's one of those things, honestly, where it's more about Arkansas, kind of crapping the bed there and playing an awful game of football. I mean, they still gave up 31 points. Like I said about Georgia, Georgia has not scored under 31 points in a single game this season except for one against Kentucky. Ole Miss this season, though, against opponents not named Arkansas in the SEC, they scored 26 against Oklahoma, 26 against LSU, 27 against South Carolina, and 17 against Kentucky. Georgia, on the other hand, against SEC opponents this season, including losses, 34 points against Alabama, 31 points against Auburn, 13 points against Kentucky, 41 points against Mississippi State, 30 points against Texas, 34 points against Florida. And except for the Arkansas game, Ole Miss has not scored over 29 points in an SEC game this year. And this is a different defense. I think this is going to be the toughest defense that they've played all year. And I think everybody's going to be picking Georgia to lose, but not me. I got the Dogs in Oxford this Saturday. And honestly, I'm not that confident in it, because if Carson Beck does not have the game that he needs to have, if he throws interception after interception and Jackson Dart plays well enough and gets around our defense, Starks gave up a big touchdown last week, and he's one of our best DBs. Our defense has got to play a really good game. Carson Beck's got to play a really good game. Carson Beck has got to keep us in it. It can't just be defense, because that's what's been doing it. However, Carson Beck, if he has the best game he can, Georgia will win this game. So give me the Dogs, and I will have the Dogs cover. I say that we win by at least 3.
I don't know anybody who's not picking Georgia for this game. I would like to put that out there right now before. Yeah, I haven't heard the narrative of Georgia not winning the game whatsoever.
I promise you that. I promise you that. I'm not trying to interrupt. I promise you it's out there. Josh Pate on the late kick actually picked Ole Miss to win this game because it's in Oxford and because of the way that Ole Miss just beat Arkansas. That was his reasoning. So I don't know, but my reasoning is just because of the way that they played other opponents not named Arkansas.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I mean, Trey Harris, Jackson Dart are great, but I mean, Wells, ever since the South Carolina game, seems like he has butter on his gloves instead of stickum. He tried to cheat and use stickum, but he used spray on butter instead. Um, yeah, Georgia wins this game. I mean, I think Ole Miss's offense could do something. I think their defense is better this year. I think they do have a decent defense, and it's going to give Carson Beck a hard time. But at the end of the day, um, Jackson Dart really didn't do much. It was more the run game against South Carolina when they played South Carolina. Now that's the best defense I think Ole Miss played. Just referring back to a statement earlier, I don't think it was LSU. Granted, LSU had a good game against them. I think South Carolina's defense was the best defense Ole Miss played, and they had to run the ball a whole bunch. Well, Georgia can stop that eventually. Meanwhile, if you have no pass game at Ole Miss, you're not going to be very productive. And
that's what, and that's exactly what I was about to say, because their defense is top 10 in stopping the run, and our defense and our offense is in the 90s running the ball. So we have to be able to move the ball through the air, which is another thing I just wanted to add on to what you were saying. And that's why Carson Beck will have to have a legacy game with no turnovers.
Nah, and I agree. But also kind of referring back to the Texas game, it's a very similar situation where I think we even said it's a very similar situation where, Texas had an offense that was rolling. It seemed like their offense was unstoppable. Their defense was in question. But then all of a sudden, as soon as they went up against Georgia, it was completely flipped. I mean, quarterback who was, in the running for Heisman all of a sudden is out of the Heisman race because he had one of the worst games probably of his career. So yeah, I have UGA. Again, apparently there are people picking against UGA, but I don't care where it is, who it is, who's ranked what. There's no way I see Ole Miss winning this game. And I think Lane Kiffin will be suspended for a game afterwards for the amount of players faking injury.